pressure creates something, and it does really. You can see it, how we progress in tech. Because at the end, you're just successful if you are able to create clarity on the path forward, on the benefits, if you can create energy as well. Information is one thing, but even more important is context. We need to go through automation before we go through disruption.
Welcome to another episode of Banking on Success, the podcast in which senior leaders share their insights about transformation, leadership and business across CEE and beyond. My name is Elica. I'm heading the Institutional Clients Business of RBI, and I'm pleased to have
Christian, Head of Group Prime Services, and I'm happy to be with you.
So Christian is today my dear co-host, and both of us, Christian and me, are very pleased to welcome Marianne Janik, who is accommodated today our schedule. Thank you for that. She's Vice President EMEA North at Google Cloud. Before we deep dive into our conversation, I would like to shortly introduce you, Marianne, to our audience. You joined Google Cloud in October 2024 beforehand, and you are responsible for Nordics, DACH, and also Central and Eastern Europe. Beforehand, you had senior positions at Microsoft, particularly CEO of Microsoft Germany, and also country manager for Switzerland. You also have experience in automotive and aerospace, and on top you have a PhD in law. So I think our conversation will be much about artificial intelligence and cloud computing. But before we pick up your brain on these two topics and points around them, I would like to raise a bit more personal question at the beginning. Could you share with us where did you grow up? What inspired you to study law? And how did you manage, or what made you transform from law studies into the amazing world of technology? Because it's, at least for me, it's not that natural.
Thank you for having me, first of all, Isa and Christian. And yes, so I grew up at the Lake of Constance. At the time, the French military was there. So I was brought up in this French community in the middle of Germany and very close to Switzerland. We've all forgotten about that. And both my parents were teachers. So for me, after having been all in literature and everything, I thought law would help me structure my thoughts and learn to, look at the world in a very different way and have a new perspective. So I was always clear that I did not want to work as a lawyer, and technology was always something that fascinated me, maybe because, as a little girl, I was able to look at all kinds of tanks and military vehicles. We were living this sort of military life at the beginning, and technology was already fascinating. So when I entered Daimler, I felt, at home with, let's say, all the different technology at the time. They had airplanes, they had helicopters, they had cars, they had trains. It was a very different company than Mercedes today.
Very interesting.
Yeah, this inspires me to a question, honestly speaking, because now technology and the technology industry is somehow different to what you experienced in the beginning. We were talking about tanks and stuff like that. Now we're talking about software. So this is a huge step.
Yes.
You were now at Microsoft. Then you joined Google. A change of culture or similar companies? Maybe this is the first question. Secondly, how was your first year? Are you okay?
No, thank you for the question, because of course, both companies are part of big tech. Both companies are very successful companies. Microsoft went through a huge transformation. I'm very proud I was part of that transformation. For me, it was important also for my personal development to look a little bit deeper into technology. And Google is a company that is, by being very innovation-driven, it's a more engineering-led culture, which I very much like. Going back to my origins, basically, where, I've seen innovation and embedded technology as well come to life. I felt this was the right step. Google has got 3 Nobel Prize in the last 12 months. So I really feel at home in this environment that is very much driven by innovation, where employees are really, even challenged in a positive way to be innovative and to push the envelope.
You said legal or studying law gave you a structure. Do you benefit from this structure in your current job and also in the software environment?
I think this way of looking at a problem and being able to cut it into pieces and then to apply a sort of a systematic thinking, because law is a system at the end. In Europe, we don't have case law, at least on the continent. This is always applicable in problem solving, I would say. So I benefit every day. And of course, as a manager, you come across a lot of legal topics, true legal topics as well, where having that background gives you a lot of confidence how to treat, certain things. So there's always, during my career, there was always opportunity to think and, have the knowledge as a lawyer.
This, by the way, fully resonates with me because I also have a legal background and I don't work as a lawyer, obviously. But you're completely right that studying law helps a lot in the way how you approach topics, problems, and also argumentation helps a lot. As a manager now, we already have the keyword manager, and I would like to switch gear a bit to leadership. In your current career level stage, what would you say is your still biggest challenge as a leader? And maybe a second question attached to that, if you were about to advise your younger self, what leadership belief would you challenge first?
So regarding the challenges as a leader, it has not fundamentally changed from when I started in 1991. What has changed is the pace and also the focus on, being a role model for everyone you work with, basically on your personal ecosystem, and being able to meet people where they are, be it, employees, be it customers, be it partners. Because at the end, you're just successful if you are able to create clarity on the path forward, on the benefits, if you can create energy as well. Because at the end, as a leader, you have to deliver results. So how to get there has always been similar. It's just the pace and also the intellectual challenge and also the psychology, how to make that happen and be present and close as well, especially to employees and partners.
And I think if you look at the big techs, and if you look at the press releases each quarter, you see enormous growth rates, billions of dollars revenue, profits, and so on. And for me, the question is also the pace is one thing, but also the pressure to continuously, on the one hand side, transform, and on the other hand, deliver the big results, which always needs to be bigger. How do you kind of, for your own personality, manage this pressure and also kind of keep the team motivated? And last but not least, retain the people, because I assume that there is a lot of change within these companies, right?
Yes. For me, when I started working for big tech in 2011, I managed, and this takes a little while, to look at this pressure in a positive way. Of course, it's not only positive because it puts pressure on yourself and your colleagues, your teams, but it's a very important part of the work hygiene, because you are working in a very competitive market where this pressure also creates a lot of innovation. And you see that in that kind of race we have within big tech, that this also really brings innovation for mankind. So the first thing is to look at this pressure not only in a critical negative way, but to see the positives of the pressure, because pressure creates something, and it does really. You can see it, how we progress in tech. The other part I would say is important is to constantly skill yourself, learn. That's, I think, the most important thing, to day by day look at, how the day's been, what you learned, and there's always plenty of things that happening within a day. Then when it comes to colleagues and teams to motivate, I think it's about this clarity, even if everything is ambiguous, to be able at least, to find the right communication path and to be authentic at the end, and then to keep the energy level high. And of course, we're all different people, so it's about also addressing the different needs of a person. It comes down to the person, because of course, person can at any time say, I don't like it anymore, I'm going to leave. So it's about understanding what's the intrinsic motivation for a person and keep the dialogue open.
And this can be really different, because I did my PhD in innovation long time ago already, but when I did it, I got to know a lot of people from different practices. And somehow it's really difficult kind of to meet all the kind of expectation of these teams, because tech-oriented people have a different expectation maybe than sales-oriented people. So I think this is a challenge, right?
It is. And of course, experience helps. And it also helps to be interested in people, in their biographies, what motivates them, what drives them. And you need to get to know each other and to spend time together. So for me, very important to keep, a structure of having regular one-on-ones and town halls, ask me anything formats. Of course, you have to change a little bit and adapt. But if you don't know each other, if you don't feel each other, especially in these times, you can't really address what's on people's hearts and minds. And this is constant work, and it's never easy. Yeah. And it was never easy. So this doesn't change. It's just there's more anxiety in the system, I would say, especially with young people, because they have so much choice. And they know so much more. So there's more guidance to give in a good way as well.
Clarity
again,
right?
Back to clarity, yes.
Back to clarity, and I was just thinking while you were speaking in how far this is a certain contradiction, because I have the feeling that we are over-flooded with information, and because you've mentioned in terms of clarity and authenticity, information, guidance, town hall, so this is a permanent information, also top-down. How much is necessary? So how do you find the balance between, just having the right balance between too much communication and less communication? Because I'm asking because we've been recently discussing with my leadership team of how much is good.
Yeah.
Because some people say, I don't feel well informed. Others say it's too much, too many meetings. So how is it on your end in your company?
Thank you for the question. It's indeed one of the questions at the moment. And I tend to reflect a little bit on context. So I've learned over the years that information is one thing, but even more important is context. So at the end, for me, it's always, do I have new context
to
share? Do I need to repeat? Because communication is sometimes also about just repeating. the question I ask
the
myself.
old legal principle, the message is when it's understood by the one receiving it.
Exactly. And so sometimes you really have to repeat. If you feel, oh, I'm going to be boring, you feel you have to repeat. So for me, I solely look at how much context can I provide. Is it news in the context? So I need to do the next step. And my experience is people like, have this context. So the piece of information, it comes across, within, it makes more sense.
Yeah, agree. Again, changing a bit the topic and looking maybe to the market, which I would be interested more because I'm not coming from the technology world as Christian. How does the landscape looks like for hyperscale cloud? Who are the competitors? What are the advantages of Google Cloud within this environment?
Yeah. No, the good thing is there is competition in this market, and there is fierce competition. So I really appreciate this environment where smart people are really looking at evolving technology, at the same time also raise critical questions. So it's actually a fierce but a competition where you see eye to eye. This is what I really like. And of course, there's difference. So that's also good. That's good for customers. And the difference, I would say, is a bit also in the DNA of the different companies. So you can really look back. And, it's AWS, it's obviously Microsoft. But we see also Oracle being part of the market, again, in a good way. IBM has found some niches to come back in with open source models. So actually, it's not just the three hyperscalers. There are some more, and then we have very interesting startups coming, like in Europe, Mistral, for example. Mm-hmm. So the DNA of the company is sort of dictating a lot. What's the difference? And the difference for Google Cloud is that we have taken the decision, a very bold decision, I think, to be present in market on all the layers you need to provide, good AI services. So it starts really with hardware, with building our own chips. Then, with infrastructure, then with a lot of research for us at Google, what happens in Google research, all the papers that are being published, also the work of DeepMind, is super interesting because it goes back then into product development and applications. So we're talking about 4 layers and include research as well, because this is a big asset at the end to keep the company very, very innovative and be present in every market, both the consumer world and the enterprise world.
This is interesting because it's remind me a little bit on the value chain concept. Mm. So I think also we in banking try to kind of prove that we are providing a value chain coming from the infrastructure until the advisory, with human touch and everything. When I thought about our topic, I thought, well, how can you differentiate now? This, I think, is super difficult if I think about cloud, for example. I mean, this is about prices at the end of the day, about availability and stuff like that. And the other topic is, do you think that, your branding also, Google is a name already in the common language in our normal, let's say, normal people segment. Do you think that you benefit from that for the industry, so that also your brand recognition in the day-to-day world helps you?
Yeah, I mean, both your first argument, being sort of have a deep, have all the layers. You can, in sometimes, and we see that at the moment, that chips, for example, are also a very competitive advantage to have. That was not the case maybe 2-3 years ago, where, everybody thought everything is available. Now that, we have a very strong players on the market, it gets interesting also for us to bring those chips we've developed for ourselves into the market. So having the different layers can help you in different times to emphasize one part of your business. Being in both worlds has, so the consumer world and the enterprise world has advantages. First of all, our cloud infrastructure is being stress tested all the time by billions of users, because we have 7 services for consumers that are really used around the globe by billions of people. So you really develop a far more resilient technology. You also are being trained of being far more user-centric, because a consumer, if he doesn't like the product and it can be for free, he won't use it. And in the enterprise world, sometimes we make sacrifices. We accept things that maybe not so perfect. So there is this scalability, this user centricity, and also the security part, because if you have to offer secure services for billions of people, you learn a lot also for the enterprise. So I think this is a big advantage, big competitive advantage.
Maybe following to this question, industry-wise, do you see, because everybody's talking about, AI, cloud, and what have you, are there any industries who you see in the lead adapting this technology? Because, purely reading the newspaper or looking at our peers, everybody would be in the lead, let's say.
Yes.
But I guess there are some in the lead, right?
Yes, I mean, there are some studies looking at different industries. If I look, just me personally talking to a lot of customers in Europe, I still feel that the financial industry is in the lead, in the sense that, the financial industry has always worked with machine learning, always been used to work on complex risk models, had the so-called quants, So I believe because the expertise is there are more informed decision how to use technology. Of course, there are some horizontal, I would call them use cases or plays where some industries like retail, can really benefit if you look at all the marketing and the e-commerce and all these kind of things. So there are more, I would say, trendy, more product application-driven use cases. The financial industry has more expertise, I think, and has been able to create out of itself, really relevant use cases. The other industries like retail just benefit from the evolution of e-commerce and from applications that are, sort of developed by big tech, for example.
And now this brings me to ask a question of pure curiosity from my part. Is there, in terms of AI deployment, is there any difference between the regions, like between CEE and Western Europe, and between Europe and the rest of the world? So any view on that?
Well, when I travel in CEE, and this has always been the case, I see, how much more technical expertise we have in CEE. Again, the budgets may be smaller, but given the expertise, is a bit the same argument like in financial industries. We see a lot of very promising startups. We have some unicorns already in CEE, like 11 Labs, for example. So I see CEE adopting AI in a very different way, really embracing it, understanding what can be done, what are the limitations. Western Europe, I would say, is still, finding their way, seeing the benefit. We still have a little bit the pilot type of phase, although in Davos this was a big topic that it's the end of the pilot, is the beginning now to create real value with AI. but there are differences, and the one big difference is really the technical expertise and the ability to work across, the business, legal department, compliance. And if you have less budget and you are a bit more agile, you tend to work together and understand each other, be able to translate, and then you create products and you use AI in a different way.
Gives me a lot of confidence
Yes, I was just about
because I'm a
say in
huge
the same
fan of
direction.
adaptive agile organizations, which we also implemented, because at the end of the day, this is all about tech, and tech is then again based on statistics and mathematics and all this stuff. Yes, and we see in CE a lot of talent. So
a lot of innovation spirit.
I can definitely confirm that. Also nice to hear that the financial industry is once in the lead of innovation, because predominantly 30 years ago it was automotive, retail, and so on. So thank you for confirming that. Just one question to that one. There is no kind of disruption currently going on, because we talked a lot about disruption in the past 10 years. I think it's now a continuous development, right?
Well, I think at a certain time we will see disruption. What we see a lot at the moment is automation.
Yeah.
Some of it is still a lot of machine learning, honestly. So I think it's always important to have honest discussions, but that also demands that you understand what's going on. I think the next phase is going to be the phase where we're not going only to talk about automation, we are looking at disrupting processes. And there, of course, you need a view from the top, because somebody working with AI in a certain role will never look at the whole process. So that's why, leading from the top is so important, because from the top you look at your business and your business processes, your business model in a different way. So it's good to have unleash this creativity of everyone in a company. But now for the next phase, the tone from the top, the understanding from the top is going to be crucial.
And this is what you do, right, at Google, that you really look, 10 years ahead and think about topics which we cannot imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, we do that as well, but we also a normal company. Okay. So we have a legal department, we have a marketing department, and what we do at the moment, trying to be also very honest with ourselves, is that we really systematically, in a structured way, applying AI, both for automation, and we see that we are ourselves as well, despite, having research and looking into the future, that we need to go to the groundwork. So we need to go through automation before we go through disruption.
And now I come with a question. Actually, it's coming from my son. I have a Gen Z son who recently asked me, Mom, when I see how the world develops, what job should I look for? What job will remain, which I can do? Because you mentioned you have legal, you have marketing, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah.
For a Gen Z, what does it mean?
Yes. I think, it means two things. I've got, two children as well. They're 24 and 21. They also ask this kind of question. I think it's training the ability to stay curious, to be resilient as well, because this generation sometimes is not used to getting a no, or that things don't move forward. So training this and accepting that the path is going to be a little bit of a zigzag for everyone. And then, of course, when it comes to jobs, I think it's still important, if somebody has an academic ambition, to go for it, even if we might think this will not exist in 5 years, it still will give you a good foundation. Otherwise, of course, the jobs that will not go away are everything that involves manual labor, where robots will take a lot of time to get there. So if you have a pleasure and a passion for anything that is more manual versus academic, or you combine both. That's an important part. But it's certainly going to be in our, young generation needs a lot of, I would say, guidance and to find their ways. And there's a lot of anxiety, for sure, with young people. But there are some positives as well, because we always look back and see it was so much better 10 years ago, 30, and it actually isn't. So I think it's also on us to show the positive
things
and to see
in the development
what,
we have.
as mankind, we've been able to achieve, and that we will have to adapt, as we always do.
And I think you're a great example. Coming from law to Daimler, from tanks to software. So this is, a huge example. For me, I fully share your view that, the past was not always better. I think we also had to do some zigzags. I think this solid background of business and, let's say, technology is something what the kids from now on learn automatically by even applying all those tools they have right now.
They're using it.
They're using it.
They're learning real time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this makes me confident in a way. Maybe a personal question. Are you also programming?
Well, I did, because I already did it at school. We had a math teacher who was a pilot in World War II and believed that, we needed to learn. And he said, I'm a math teacher. I will tell you how to program in BASIC. So I was lucky very early on to learn. And then I continued a little bit. At the moment, I don't. But what is very interesting, if you build your own agents, at least you know how this works and you have an understanding. But building your own agents is at the moment my challenge. I try to keep up with that challenge and to do some of this.
Last question, also personal. How do you re-energize? So where do you recreate and collect energy for all the challenges?
I get a lot of energy in this innovation vibe, when I see people really sitting together, finding new solutions and creating new things. And at the moment, if you look at the pace in which product in this industry are being shipped, we call that shipped as well, it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And at the same time, being able, and this is an intellectual challenge, to have the discussion, what is this doing with us, how we're dealing with it. I get a lot of energy, and especially interacting with people. And at Google, all employees are still very young. It's a young company. So I'm very grateful to be surrounded by young people.
Thank you, Marianne, in the name of Christian, also from me, for joining us today.
Thank
for
you.
the energizing talk and the insights. Dear audience, thanks for joining, and stay tuned for the next episode of Banking on Success.
Raiffeisen Bank International. Make it happen.